September 4th, 1900, Volume 3. Impurities and good works done badly are a disgusting and insipid food for Jesus. After I received communion, my adorable Jesus transported me outside of myself, making himself seen highly afflicted and embittered. I prayed him to pour his bitternesses into me, but Jesus would not pay attention to me. However, as I insisted, after a long time, he pleased to pour. After he had poured a little bit of bitterness, I asked, "Lord, don't you feel better now?" And he, "Yes, but it was not what I poured that gave me so much pain. Rather, it was a disgusting and insipid food that does not let me rest." And I, "Pour a little into me, so you will be relieved a little." And he, "If I cannot digest it and bear it, how could you?" And I know that my weakness is great, but you will give me grace and strength, and so I will be able to contain it within myself. I understood, however, that the disgusting food was the impurities, and the insipid food was the good works done badly, all scrambled, which are rather of bother and of weight for our Lord. He almost despises receiving them, and unable to bear them, he wants to pour them out of his mouth. Who knows how many of mine there are too? So, almost forced by me, he also poured a little bit of that food. How right Jesus was! The bitter was more tolerable than that disgusting and insipid food. If it were not for love of him, I would not have accepted it at any cost. After this, blessed Jesus placed his arm behind my neck, and leaning his head on my shoulder, he placed himself in the act of wanting to take rest. While he was resting, I felt I was in a place in which there were many movable tiles, and underneath them the abyss. Fearing I might fall, I woke him up, invoking his help, and he said to me, "Do not fear, this is the path that all cover. It takes nothing but all of one's attention. And since the majority walk carelessly, this is why many fall into the abyss, and few are those who reach the harbor of salvation." After this, he disappeared, and I found myself inside myself. September 4th, 1901, Volume 4. Gratitude is the key to open the treasures of God. Ardors of the heart of Jesus for the glory of the divine majesty and the good of souls. What the soul can do to fill the voids of his glory on the part of creatures. As my adorable Jesus continued to come, this morning, as I saw him, I felt such a yearning to ask him whether he had forgiven my sins. So I said to him, "My sweet love, how I yearn to hear from your lips whether you have forgiven my many sins." Jesus drew close to my ear, and with his gaze he seemed to scrutinize all of my interior. And he told me, "Everything is forgiven, and I remit them. There is nothing left in you but a few defects committed by you in passing, without realizing it, and I remit those as well." After this, it seemed that Jesus placed himself behind my shoulders, and touching my back with his hand, he fortified it thoroughly. Who can say what I felt at that touch? I can only say that I felt a refreshing fire, a purity united to a fortitude. Then, after he touched my back, I prayed him to do the same to my heart, and Jesus, to content me, condescended. Afterwards it seemed to me as if blessed Jesus was tired because of me. And I said to him, "My sweet life, you are tired because of me, aren't you?" And he, "Yes, at least be grateful for the graces I am giving you, because gratitude is the key to be able to open, as one pleases, the treasures that God contains. Know, however, that what I did to you will serve to preserve you from corruption, to strengthen you, and to dispose your soul and body for the eternal glory." After this, he seemed to transport me outside of myself, and he made me see the multitude of the peoples, and the good which they can do, but do not, and therefore the glory which God must receive, but does not. All afflicted, Jesus added, "My beloved, my heart burns for the honor of my glory and the good of souls. For each good they omit, my glory and their souls receive a void. Even if they do no evil, by not doing the good they could do, they are like those empty rooms, which, though beautiful, contain nothing to be admired, nothing which strikes one's gaze, and therefore their owner receives no glory. If then they do one good and neglect another, they are like those rooms, all vacated, in which one can see just a few objects, with no order. My beloved, come and take part in these pains, in the ardors which my heart feels for the glory of the divine majesty and the good of souls, and try to fill these voids of my glory. You can do this by letting not a single moment of your life pass without being united to my life. That is, in all your actions, be they prayer or suffering, rest or work, silence or conversation, sadness or joy, and even in the food you take. In sum, in everything that may happen to you, you will place the intention of giving me all the glory which others should give me in that action, and of making up for the good they should do, but do not, intending to repeat this intention for as much glory as I do not receive, and for as much good as they omit. If you do this, you will somehow fill the void of the glory which I must receive from creatures, and my heart will feel a refreshment in my ardors, and from this refreshment rivulets of grace will flow for the good of mortals, which will infuse in them more fortitude to do good. After this I found myself inside myself. September 4th, 1902, Volume 4. The Confessor asks Jesus not to let her die. As I continued to feel ill, I also felt a certain restlessness because of this strange obedience, as if I could not take flight toward my highest and only good, with the addition that, having to celebrate Holy Mass, the confessor did not want to give me communion because of the continuous retching that bothered me. However, since my confessor had told me that out of obedience I should have Jesus Christ touch my stomach, as he came, he touched my stomach, and the continuous retching ceased. But the malady would not cease, and Jesus, seeing me so restless, told me, "My daughter, what are you doing? Do you not know that if death surprises you, finding you restless, you would have to get purgatory? In fact, if your mind is not united with mine, if your will is not one with mine, if your desires are not my same desires, by necessity you need a purge to be transformed completely in me. Therefore be attentive. Think only of remaining united with me, and I will think of the rest." Now, while he was saying this, I saw the church and the Pope, and part of it was leaning on my shoulders. And I also saw the confessor, who pressed Jesus not to take me for now. And the blessed Lord said, "Evils are most grave, and sins are about to reach such a point as no longer to deserve victim souls, that is, the ones who sustain and protect the world before me. If this point touches justice, indeed I will take her with me." So I understood that things are conditional. September 4th, 1905, Volume 6. In all times God has had souls from whom, as much as is possible for a creature, he has received the purpose of creation, redemption, and sanctification, and who have received his goods. Continuing in my usual state, my adorable Jesus made me see his most sacred humanity, all of his wounds, his pains, and from within his wounds, even from the drops of his blood, many branches loaded with fruits and flowers came out, and it seemed that he communicated his sufferings to me, as well as all his branches loaded with flowers and fruits. I remained surprised on seeing the goodness of our Lord in sharing all his goods with me, without excluding me from anything of all that he contained. And blessed Jesus told me, "My beloved daughter, do not be surprised at what you see, for you are not alone, nor the only one. In fact, in all times I have had souls from whom, as much as is possible for a creature, perfectly in some way, I might receive the purpose of my creation, redemption, and sanctification, and the creature might receive all the goods for which I created, redeemed, and sanctified man. Otherwise, if I did not have even one single creature in each time, my whole work would be frustrated, at least for some time. This is the order of my providence, of my justice, and of my love, that in each time I must have at least one with whom I might share all goods, and that the creature must give me everything she owes me as creature. Otherwise, why maintain the world? In one moment I would shatter it. This is precisely why I choose victim souls. Just as divine justice found in me everything it should find in all creatures, and shared with me, altogether, the goods it would have shared with all creatures, in such a way that my humanity contained everything, so do I find everything in the victims, and I share all my goods with them. During the time of my passion, I had my dearest mother, who, while I shared all my pains and all my goods with her, was most attentive as creature, on gathering within herself everything that creatures were to do for me. Therefore in her I found all my satisfaction, and all the gratitude, the thanksgiving, the praise, the reparation, the correspondence which I was to find in everyone else. Then came Magdalene, John, and so on in all the times of the church. And so that these souls might be more pleasing to me, and I might feel drawn to give them everything, first I anticipate them, and then I ennoble their souls, bodies, traits, and even their voices, in such a way that one single word has so much strength, it is so gracious, sweet, penetrating, that it moves my whole being to compassion and tenderness. It changes me, and I say, "Ah, this is the voice of my beloved. I cannot do without listening to her. It would be as though wanting to deny what she wants to my very self. If I am not to listen to her, I should take the will to speak away from her. But as for sending her back empty-handed, never." So there is such electricity of union between me and her that the soul herself cannot comprehend everything in this life, though she will comprehend it with all clarity in the next. September 4th, 1918, Volume 12, Laments of Jesus because of Priests. As I was in my usual state, my always lovable Jesus came for just a little and told me, "My daughter, creatures want to challenge my justice. They do not want to surrender, and therefore my justice takes its course against them. And these are creatures from all classes, excepting not even those who are said to be my ministers, and maybe these more than others. What poison they have, and they poison those who approach them. Instead of placing me in the souls, they want to put themselves. They want to be surrounded, be known, and I remain aside. Their poisonous contact, instead of rendering souls recollected, distracts them from me. Instead of rendering them reserved, it makes them more free, more faulty, to the extent that one can see souls who have no contact with them being more good and more recollected. So I cannot trust anyone. I am forced to allow that people go far away from churches, from the sacraments, in order to prevent their contact from poisoning them more, making them more evil. My sorrow is great. The wounds of my heart are deep. Therefore pray, and united with those few good who are still around, compassionate my bitter sorrow. September 4th, 1927, Volume 22, How All Creation is Invested by the Acts Done in the Divine Will. I was following my round throughout the whole creation, and I had invested heavens, sun, sea, in sum all created things, with my I love you, I adore you, I bless you, to sing glory to my Creator in all creation. Now while I was doing this, my sweet Jesus moved within me and told me, "My daughter, listen together with me to all the harmonies of creation. Listen." The sea murmurs, but in that murmuring a more beautiful note can be heard. The I love you, the I adore you, the I bless you, the glory that the little daughter of my will murmurs together with the sea. And making the whole sea murmur, she makes the waters speak her loving refrains to her Creator. Oh, how the sea acquires new notes of harmony, of beauty, new sounds more beautiful, because my little daughter emits her voice in my divine will, and renders the sea speaking, and gives the glory of the sea to her Creator. Listen. The sun, too, in its light that rains down from the heavens and invests the whole earth, pours your loving notes together with it, your welcome refrains. I love you, I glorify you, I bless you, I adore you. In fact, since the divine will that reigns in you is one with what reigns in the sun, oh, how eloquently does the light speak, how the love of her Creator flows in the heat. How many new harmonies and notes that are not its own it acquires, because there is the little daughter of the Supreme Will who emits her acts in it, and making her will one with that of all creation, she administers her voice and her acts to all created things. Listen. The nature of the sea, of the sun, do not have the virtue of speaking, and to find one who lives in my will and communicates her voice, her acts to them, is the most amazing thing. It is the greatest glory that you can give to your Creator. So there is not one created thing that is not invested by your acts, and I delight in listening to your notes and to your repeated refrains in the heavens, in the air, in the wind, in the water that rains down, in the little bird that sings, in everything. And I want that you too, together with me, hear your own harmonies that you form in the whole creation. My daughter, the littlest motion, even the littlest breath done in the divine will, is all of God. And because it is His own, He finds in it everything that is His. In the act done in my divine fiat, He finds divine sanctity. He finds His light. He finds His goodness, His love, His power. That act lacks nothing of what belongs to God. Therefore they can be called divine acts that are the most beautiful, the holiest, and the most welcome. And before these acts, all other acts, as good as they may be, lose their value, their taste, and can never please me. It happens as to a lord who is extremely rich. He possesses riches, gardens, farms with the most beautiful fruits that no one can equal. Now, since this lord knows that no one else has fruits and good things like his own, if his sons or his servants bring him the fruits of his own gardens, he appreciates them. He enjoys them with love, eating of them to his fill. But if they bring him fruits from someone else's farms, he will not enjoy them, because he will immediately notice the great difference. He will find them defective, unripe, and disgusting, and will lament to his own, for they dared to bring him things and fruits that are not his. The same happens to us. Everything that is done in our divine will is our own, the fruits of our boundless farms. And because they are our own things, we find nothing in them that is unworthy of our divinity, and therefore we take all delights in receiving them. On the other hand, what is done outside of our divine will is something extraneous to us. It lacks the divine imprint. It is without the fullness of tastes, of light, of sanctity, of sweetness. Even in the best things, the human will always put the unripe part that ruins the taste of the most beautiful things. And so, seeing that those are not things from our farms, the fruits of our divine will, we put them aside, and many times we do not even look at them. Therefore I recommend to you, let nothing escape you that does not enter the light of my supreme fiat, so that everything may be our own, and highly pleasing to us. September 4th, 1929, Volume 26. Why does the sun form the day? Because it is an act of divine will. My days are most bitter because of the privation of my highest and only good, Jesus. I can say that my continuous food is the intense sorrow of being without He who formed the whole of my life down here. How painful it is to remember that I once would breathe Jesus. The heartbeat of Jesus would palpitate in my heart. Jesus would circulate in my veins. I would feel the nourishment of Jesus feeding my works, my steps. In some, I felt Jesus in everything. And now, everything is over and has changed for me into nourishment of sorrow. Oh God, what pain to breathe and palpitate the intense sorrow of being without He who was more than my own life, such that only the abandonment in the fiat gives me the strength to bear a sorrow so great. But while I was feeling this, my sweet Jesus, coming out of my interior, and clasping me in his arms told me, "My daughter, courage! Do not lose heart too much. Tell me, who forms the day? The sun, doesn't it? And why does it form the day? Because it is an act of my divine will. Now, as the earth rotates, the side that moves away from the sun remains in the dark and forms the night, and the poor earth remains gloomy, as though under a mantle of sadness, in such a way that all feel the reality of the night, and the great change that the earth undergoes by having lost the beneficial sphere of the light. That is, the act of my divine will that created the sun and preserves it with its continuous act. In the same way, as long as the soul goes around under the continuous act of my will, it is always full daylight for her. Night, darkness, sadness do not exist. The continuous act of my fiat, more than sun, smiles at her. It keeps her in feast. But if she wanders about within her human will, more than earth, she remains in the dark, in the night time of her human will, that lording over the soul produces darkness, doubts, sadness, such as to form the true real night for the poor creature. Who can tell you the great good, the most refulgent day that an act of my divine will produces over the creature? With its continuous act, it produces all goods and happiness in time and eternity. Therefore, be attentive. Enclose all of yourself within a single act of my divine will. Never go out of it if you want to live happy and have in your power the life of the light and the day that never sets. An act of my divine will is everything for the creature. With its continuous act that never ceases and never changes, more than tender mother, it keeps she who abandons herself in its act of light clasped to its breast, and nourishing her with light, it raises her as a birth from itself, noble and holy, and it keeps her sheltered within its very light. September 4th, 1932, Volume 31, The Exchange, the Need of Divine Love. The Operating Divine Will, Continuation of Creation. I am always in the sea of the divine volition, which makes present to me the whole of creation, that immense theater in which there are scenes so moving that in clear notes reveal the great love of God toward creatures, and enrapture the heart to love him. And I thought about the great human ingratitude that does not let itself be enraptured to love him. And my sweet Jesus, surprising me with his heart swollen with love, told me, "My good daughter, creation was made by our Supreme Being in order to give love, and to receive the exchange of love from creatures. There is nothing created by us that this was not our purpose, to make it in order to receive and exchange from it. Otherwise our works would not have been communicative, fruitful, nourishing, and full of life in order to make man happy. They would have been as painted works that at the most entice the sight, but would do no good to anyone. On the contrary, by wanting the exchange, we place, as on the way, the communication of the light, in order to give them the life of the light, the air, in order to give them the life of breathing, the water, the food, the fire, in order to give them the life and the good that they possess, and the same for all the rest. How many acts of life did we place around the creature in order to grow, nourish, and sustain her life? Now, wanting their exchange was a need of our love. Works without exchange are works without cortege, without appreciation, and for however much one uses them, they remain isolated works, as if they were not welcome. The exchange does not take the work only to make use of it, but it enters inside of it in order to recognize He who created it for their love. The exchange gives life to gratitude, to thanksgiving. One can say the exchange maintains the conversation, the friendship, the correspondence between the giver and the one who receives the gift. Otherwise, everything remains broken. Now listen, my daughter, to another feature of our intense love toward man. In order to have this exchange, in creating him, we placed in him our operating will, united with his, so that as our will in the work of creation made so many works for love of him, so in his soul, by virtue of possessing our divine will, he could have equal strength and power of giving us the exchange wanted by us. Our Fiat, acting in creation and acting in the creature, would place into play the human volition in order to make use of all of its acts, little and great, in order to form the just exchange of all its works that it had done in creation. Even more, that he would know the number, the variety, the beauty, and the weight of all its works. Operating in the creature, it could do no less than operate with the same multiplicity, sumptuousness, and beauty that it had operated in the universe, and so exchange its eternal works and its internal works done in the depth of the soul. The divine will made use of the human will as material in its hands to continue its creation. This is why man, by rejecting our will, made its operating life cease in its acts, while he could have made use of it to create and transform them into heavens, into stars, into suns, into seas, and so forth. He obstructed our work. He stopped it. He threw into confusion our sweet harmonies, the dear exchanges that could only exist by virtue of our volition, everything we could do in him, if our will had its operating life in him. This is the reason for our attentions, our sighs, insistences, our sorrows, that the human earth would become our field of action, in which our volition would have full liberty of doing what it wants. And do you believe that only the Supreme Being wants the exchange in its works? Also the creature does. The prime purpose in his works is the exchange. If it is there, or at least the hope of it, he has hands and feet in order to move, mouth in order to speak, strength in order to make sacrifices, time in order to work. But if there is no exchange, it seems that he has neither hands nor feet, nor mouth nor strength, nor time. He feels that life dies for that work. It seems that the exchange is nothing, but it is not true. On the contrary, it is the beginning and the life of every work. Therefore the exchange is a need of my love, and it lets me continue the work of creation. After this, I continued my abandonment in the divine Fiat, and a crowd of thoughts, doubts, and difficulties arose in my mind. And my celestial teacher added, "My daughter, my will has the virtue of centralizing the complete being of man in a single act. If he works, with its unitive virtue it centralizes in him the thoughts, the heart, the steps, and everything, in a way that the creature feels that he is not working alone, but all his being is invested by its operating strength that feels the empire of my operating will, and everything becomes one single thing. This unitive strength makes the creature dominant and ordered, because the first dowry my Fiat knows how to give is the dominion of oneself and order. And then he takes its divine dominion and becomes adaptable material in its hands, that lends itself to its marvelous works. On the other hand, without my will, the creature does not possess the unitive strength in his acts, and therefore he sees himself all scattered, and without order, and hard material that does not yield itself to the forms that our volition wants to give. End of September 4th. Fiat.